Hi, I'm your host, Marlo Lemon, and you're listening to Wild Voice, the podcast where I take this voice of mine and share my wild journey with you. Being widowed at 34 with a 15-month-old, most would see as life ending. And instead, I alchemized it and put life back together, and it became more beautiful and fulfilling than I could have ever imagined. Through this life shift of mine, I realized who I am and what I'm here to do. I'm an intuitive energy healer, and sharing how I view the world is how I help you upgrade your life and alchemize your journey into magic. From day one, I wanted to share my journey, call it intuition, but I knew it was going to do more good out in the world than keeping it to myself. So when I say I've mastered life, that doesn't mean I'm perfect or that life is. I mean, I've mastered the concept of life, and I want to share that with you. So these last few weeks, I've been doing the final run through of my manuscript. It's pretty much at the stage where a copy editor has gone through it, and now I'm going through it one last time. And to give you an update on how it's going, well, I've added 10 pages so far with my edits and additions, and I have 2 parts, which are my version of chapters, left to go through. It's been nice to write it, step back from it, and look at it one last time with fresh eyes. I get to put those final touches on it. And as I get through each part, there are 8, by the way, the end of each one has a lesson, takeaway, and tools to integrate into your everyday life. So, entertaining, thought-provoking, and upgrading your life all at the same time. It's honestly what I'm most excited about. I get this giddy feeling when I see how everything before this has led me here. I'll give you a little behind the scenes detail that no one else knows yet. The lesson sections at the end of the chapters of this self-help memoir are called the lemonade. You get it? Last name's Lemon, and we're pretty much taking lemons and making lemonade. And the subsection of that, which is the tool you get to start integrating right then and there, is called the solution. You get that? Like soul and solution? Okay. So soul alignment in homework form, a way to practice in your own life. And for that reason, and what this book stands for, mastering that connection to our soul, the title of the book is Soul Muse. The Wild Ride to Spiritual as Fuck. Fun, right? The amount of time I have spent over the years thinking and writing down book names, it actually is quite comical. Some of them, when I look back at the very first ones I started with, I actually was embarrassed to share them with anybody. But luckily, with time, it all came together. And this is where we ended up. Okay, so enough about the book for now, but it is the catalyst for today's topic. As I've been working on this the last few weeks, I have something to share with you that has been brought to my attention in the process. And how ironic it has a lot to do with my soul. So up until this new life of mine, which we'll say started 5 years ago, I was very human-led. I pretty much ignored anything my soul wanted and went very logical with my life. I don't have to remind you, it wasn't a great process. So when life changed, I went the complete opposite direction and led with my soul. And as time went on, I want to say I started to leave my human self in the dust, or at least drug her along for the ride. A great ride and great direction. But I leaned heavy into that soul want since I spent so much of my life ignoring it. It's been invigorating, beautiful, and magical, even amongst the tough lessons and moments. It had a different feeling to it. It was liberating, and I knew exactly what life is meant to feel like. Not the torture cycle I was putting myself through before. A few weeks ago, something was brought to my attention during a healing session I had with one of my mentors. I was needing another set of eyes to help me move through a really tough, sticky moment that I could feel I needed help with. It was in an area of my life that is a core lesson. That means a deep-rooted one that normally is there once we have done all the other healing. But it is key to our overall well-being and soul purpose connection. kind of like the core piece to release and navigate and work with to push through to get to a higher frequency and soul alignment. Cool shit happens here, I promise you, but it's work. So even I have those times where I need someone outside of myself to help point the arrow or highlight or decode what the fuck is going on. So come to find out, the reason for the really overwhelming, tough spot I was navigating and level 10 emotions, level 10, like the internal house is on fire, not a happy 10, was because my human self was tapped out. She had been tied up, blindfolded, drugged through the mud, held underwater, etc., etc., etc. With everything I've gone through and healed through, along the way, I stopped checking in with her. Picture someone just put through the ringer, and she was done. Here, my soul self was up for this journey, but at some point along the way, I stopped having grace for the human side of me. My human self and soul self were on the same page through my healing journey until recently. Until recently, I was forcing my human self to be okay with certain things, to convince her all the ways we were going to keep growing and learning, instead of stopping, acknowledging, and taking the time to get her on board. I mean, my soul is powerful, but it does need my human self to play out any purpose and journey it's here for. The impatience comes from my soul knowing the lesson is gold, and the release to the pain is within the lesson. So I would push and push and push and drag and drag and drag until my human self had enough. It's like knowing the end of the movie and not caring to go back and understand the middle, to actually enjoy the ending or even have it make sense. That's like with healing. I can't technically get to the ultimate release of healing if I don't acknowledge the process or the part of me doing the work. What I learned that day is our human self is the one on the front lines. For me, she is the one showing up every day to play out my soul purpose, and getting so wrapped up in the healing and excitement for the evolving, I stopped celebrating how far I've come. Instead, I started getting frustrated I wasn't feeling different or getting a lesson quick enough. Hence, why something specific had to happen in my personal life that I had been working my tools and knowledge and knowing so hard that there were days I was working at it 24/7. And I wasn't getting the release from the emotional turmoil caused by the reflections, and they were just getting louder and louder instead of quieter. I got to a day where I threw my hands up and said, fuck it. I am fed up. I tap out. You win, emotions. My feeling of tapping out was my human self saying, I am done. I'm exhausted. You have pushed me to my limit. I am not going a step further. I'm not torturing myself any longer. You have realized what we've accomplished, but not acknowledged it and not giving credit where credit is due. Even if I don't accomplish or learn another damn thing, I still have come leaps and bounds than where I started. When I stood back and realized my soul self had almost took on this role as a bully to my human self, I could visualize what that physically looked like. Seeing this was eye-opening and how I was technically treating myself. There's a lot of reasons why this is eye-opening. One of them is part of my job as a healer. A big part is I work more with your human self than your soul self. So our soul lines us up for stuff, but our human self is the one who executes it, the one here to experience it, live out the lesson. And for example, if we have a session together because you were referred, let's say, by a friend or a family member, but you don't really believe in the process yet, but you show up. That's your soul saying it wants to be here. It wants to try this out. Same reason I don't charge people for canceling sessions. It's the soul saying it's not the right time or another time is better. So if we end up having a session together, it's now my job to get your human self on board. I could teach you all the things about how this world works and what your soul wants and what will make you feel ultimate fulfillment. But if your human self is like, nah, no thanks, then it goes nowhere. So my job is to figure out what gets it to click for you. And it's different for everybody. But the goal with that is so that I can support you in living out that soul purpose of yours. It does go flat no matter how much your soul wants it if your human self is jumping ship. So I got to get both to work together, and the soul needs no convincing. It already knows. It's the human that's reluctant. That brain, the beliefs, what we're used to, what we think should happen, what we're scared of, etc., etc., etc. Or like Nash says, blah, blah, blah. So you would think I would get this, which I do. But sometimes our own shit is our lesson. So we get to really ingrain it. And in the process, with what I do, share it with you. My mastery of self is really up-leveling lately. And this is a huge example of that. So now I've painted the picture that my human self was exhausted and my soul self was being a bully. So I slowed my roll, started paying attention to what my human self needed. And I'm currently working on that balance of the two. It actually has softened my approach to a lot of things, allowing that feminine energy of mine to shine through, which is where I feel my best. Sometimes the more we know, the more overwhelmingly confusing things can get, especially in this metaphysical, spiritual sense. So long story long, this is what I've been playing with over the last couple of weeks. Knowing my soul plan will play out, I've come too far and know too much at this point. But I need to slow down and let my human self feel a part of this and not like the enemy. So the next time you want to curse your ego, your human self, for working against you, maybe it's a reminder to just check in with it. You are a spiritual being having a human experience. Remember, you are both on the same team, and working together and acknowledging both has its moments and eventually starts to mesh into one. You both want the same thing, just two different ways you think there is to get there. A combo of the two is the sweet spot. So if anything I rattled off has left you feeling like your head is spinning, give yourself some grace. And if you're a growth junkie like me, give yourself some grace times 2. I promise it will not slow you down. It ironically speeds things up. Thanks so much for being here. Please rate, like, share, and review so we can stay connected and continue this magical journey together.